What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Pistons Daily, where you can find daily content covering all things Detroit Pistons, Monday through Friday. As always, I am your host. My name is Kyle Garrison. I'm over on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2, where I talk all things Detroit sports. So head over there, give me comments, questions, concerns, episode ideas. I'd love to hear from all you guys. Also, shout out to everyone who tunes in every single day. We're on the road to 2,000 subscribers, so if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way to help support the channel. And with that being said, let's jump into a Tuesday edition of Pistons Daily. So I apologize for no video on Monday. I had a busy weekend, wasn't able to get a video uploaded on Sunday night, but we'll start here on Tuesday, go into the rest of the week. And first things first, let's talk about our skill of the day. And this isn't really a skill per se, but more just something to look forward to next season, and that is Ausar Thompson's increased role on this Pistons team. So last year, Ausar played 22.2 minutes a night in 59 regular season games and just 22.5 minutes a night in 6 playoff games. And I think in the playoffs, he would have had a just uptick in minutes, but with the foul trouble, he had to sit on the bench a little bit, and there was just some inconsistencies in the playoffs overall. But I think we should expect 30-plus minutes a night. And I imagine with the increase in minutes, there'll be an increase in his just overall role, specifically in the offense. We know what he brings defensively. He's one of the best defensive players at his position in the entire league. So he's going to continue to grow defensively. He's going to make this team better on the defensive end. But on the offensive end is where we really need to see him grow. And I do think this year we're going to see some more specific set plays where he's the main ball handler. There's going to be plays where he's the roll man in the pick and roll with Cade and Jaden Ivey because he's unbelievable attacking downhill. Giving him some space and a full head of steam downhill is going to help him thrive as a rim finisher and is just as somebody who is effective attacking downhill, creating space for Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Tobias Harris, and some of these other guys on the Pistons team who thrive with more spacing and who thrive around downhill attackers. So I do think that Ausar Thompson is going to have a lot of just trust from his teammates overall to maybe even go get a bucket late in the shot clock. Utilize that spin move that he's shown. Utilize that Euro step and just his quick feet that I don't think a lot of us thought he would have offensively as soon as he has. And it's very, very cool to see that going into year 3, there's a lot to like and there's a lot to look forward to from the offensive end of the floor. And when you're looking at his overall stats and you're looking at this cleaning the glass numbers and his advanced metrics, last year in the playoffs, he was a more efficient scorer than he was in the regular season. So in the regular season, he had a 55.3 effective field goal percentage, which was in the 58th percentile. And then from 2-point percentage, he was 57.1%, which was in the 77th percentile. And then you look at the 6 games in the playoffs, which granted is a smaller sample size. He shot 58.5%, effective field goal percentage, which was in the 83rd percentile amongst wings. And then from 2-point range, he shot 60%, which was in the 88th percentile for wings in the playoffs. And it's very, very just indicative of what's to come. And it's also encouraging because a lot of young players become playoff fallers because the intensity on defense and the energy that the other team brings defensively is just heightened compared to the regular season. So you see some of those numbers drop off. I mean, we saw Cade Cunningham last year shot around 20% from 3 in the playoffs, in that playoff series. And it was because, the defense was much more intense than it was in the regular season. And that might have caught Cade off guard a little bit. So the fact that Ausar Thompson was still able to thrive in the playoffs as a young player offensively is very, very encouraging going into next year. And I do think that we are going to see that leap take place offensively, and the numbers back it up. So very, very excited just to see what year 3 looks like for Ausar, if he can take that massive leap and those numbers can back it up, like I've talked about. But let me know in the comments or over on Twitter just your overall expectations for Ausar this year, and if you are as high on him entering year 3 as I am. But moving on, an article that I liked from Zach Crom was just the 75th anniversary of the Basketball Hall of Fame, and he did a tier list for the current landscape of NBA players and just where they fall and if they are going to be Hall of Fame players or not. And in Group 1, he has his NBA 75th anniversary team locks, and that is Giannis Antetokounmpo, That is Steph Curry, Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, James Harden, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Damian Lillard, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, all locks to make the Hall of Fame. I think that is a guarantee. And then Group 2 is non-top 75 locks, which is Nikola Jokic, Kyrie Irving, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, Paul George, Jimmy Butler, Joel Embiid, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Oh, and Rudy Gobert as well. And I think a lot of those guys are Hall of Fame locks. I think Jokic has already secured himself there. I think Kyrie has, Draymond. Klay Thompson, I would say yes as well. Paul George, we'll see how the rest of his career plays out. He's still only 34 years old, so he's got a couple years left. If he can kind of, become a solid role player for the 76ers, maybe he becomes a Hall of Famer. But right now, he hasn't won an MVP, he hasn't won an NBA championship, and that isn't exactly what goes into being a Hall of Famer. Like Damian Lillard hasn't won a ring or an MVP either, but he's still considered a Hall of Fame lock. So Paul George, he's on the fence there, but I do think eventually he will etch his name as a Hall of Famer. Like Jimmy Butler, Joel Embiid, Rudy Gobert, I think are all Hall of Famers. Rudy Gobert for his defensive energy, obviously not the offensive game that he brings, but multi-time, I think 4 defensive players of the year for Rudy Gobert. So I think he will be a Hall of Famer. And then SGA, obviously, just last year, what he did alone is enough to be a Hall of Famer. I think, a couple more solid years if he can string together some 30-point per game seasons, maybe another MVP, another championship, then that's a guaranteed. And then Group 3, young stars well on their way. That is Luka Doncic, Jason Tatum, Anthony Edwards, and Victor Wembanyama. And then Group 4, veterans on the bubble, DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry, Jrue Holiday, Kevin Love, Al Horford, and Karl Anthony Towns. And then the final group, there's 6 groups. So Group 5, 29 years old on the edge, Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, Domantas Sabonis, Jaylen Brown. And then Group 6 is circle back in a few years, and that is Tyrese Halliburton, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, Evan Mobley, Cade Cunningham, Paolo Banchero, Zion Williamson, John Morant, Trae Young, LaMelo Ball, Scotty Barnes, Alperen Sengun, Tyrese Maxey, Stephon Castle, Amen Thompson, and Cooper Flagg. And I think it's very interesting to kind of just look at this. And again, it's all speculation. These players are obviously going to play out their careers, and if they make the Hall of Fame or not, we'll actually get an answer to that. So this is all just speculation. And again, it's the NBA offseason, so things are pretty slow. But Zach Crom does a great job over at ESPN. I really like some of his stuff. And I'm not here to argue with him and say that Cade should be in the tier with Wemby and Anthony Edwards. Obviously, Cade Cunningham has more of a sample size in the NBA than Wemby does, but Wemby is a freak and might be one of the best, if not the best defenders of all time when it's all said and done. And then Anthony Edwards, he's brought his team to back-to-back conference finals at 24 years old. So, he's proven he's a winner in the playoffs. He's proven his worth in the playoffs, and that's enough to kind of put him in that tier alongside of Jason Tatum, and I believe the other one was Luka. So, I think Cade has room to get up into that tier as early as next year, but he's going to have to show that he can perform in the playoffs, and he's going to have to continue to just be one of the best point guards in the entire NBA, which I do think he will be. But when you're looking at the players in the circle back in a few years category, I think that Cade has a realistic shot over everyone to me. And I think that when you're looking at, Tyrese Halliburton, what he's done in the playoffs is incredible. But again, Cade Cunningham, just better numbers overall. I think he's more impactful on winning overall. Tyrese Halliburton has a great supporting cast around him. If he had the Pistons roster, would they be as good? I don't think so. I think that Cade just has a higher ceiling overall as well. Tyrese is a little bit older. So we'll have to see. And, Tyrese is a great player overall. I don't want to slight him, but I do think that Cade, if you're looking at the point guards on this list, like Trae Young, John Morant, LaMelo Ball, and Tyrese Halliburton, Cade's the best out of all 5 of those. I really do think that. I think he's the 3rd best point guard in the NBA right now behind Luka Doncic and SGA. So if you're looking at point guards and guards overall, I think that out of this group, Cade has the best chance to be a Hall of Famer. And you're looking at everybody else like Chet Holmgren and Evan Mobley and Paolo Banchero and Zion Williamson. Like, Cade has as good a chance as all of those guys because, again, the impact he has on winning, the numbers he puts up, how great of a facilitator he is. I really do think that, it is very, very likely that Cade continues on his trajectory, and we're looking at him in 5 years as somebody who is a potential Hall of Famer going forward. And, I'm being overzealous, and I'm totally, going out of my way to hype up Cade Cunningham here, but it's very, very true. He's a very talented player overall. He was the number 1 overall draft pick for a reason. He's the franchise player going forward. He's made this team better. He's made this team an Eastern Conference contender, and he's only 24 years old. So there's so much room for growth. There's so much room for him to continue working on on the foundation that he's built. And it's just cool to see that he's getting recognized amongst some of the best young talent in the entire NBA. And kind of speaking on that, it really puts into perspective how much young talent is in this league and why there is so much parity year to year, because it seems like every year in the group 6, in the final tier, there's somebody that kind of boosts themselves up, like SGA last year, and like Victor Wembanyama, and like Anthony Edwards. Every year there's somebody that you look at as, man, they're a guy that can lead their team to a championship. I think Cade is well on his way. But let me know in the comments if you think the trajectory Cade is on is worthy of a Hall of Fame inductee when it's all said and done, or just what you think needs to happen for Cade to be considered Hall of Fame worthy. Again, at the end of his career, not right now. He's not a Hall of Famer right now. That would just be a casual take. But in the future, if you do think that Cade can be a Hall of Famer. Moving on here, I know I've done I haven't done a lot of trade ideas, but I've done a lot of just talking about how the Pistons might want to look at upgrading the power forward position going forward, find a better future option, whether it be free agency or trade, I'm not quite sure, but I would imagine that the next move is to kind of add a stretch power forward to complement Jalen Duren and Ausar Thompson in that starting lineup, somebody that can give you 37, 38, 39% three-point shooting and can just be a consistent offensive threat around guys like Ausar Thompson who pride themselves on the defensive end, and somebody that can kind of be that starter as Ron Holland kind of comes into his own as an NBA player. You don't want to force him into the starting lineup very soon, so maybe a guy like Pascal Siakam could be somebody you push for, somebody you look at the trade deadline. Again, I have no idea what Trajan Langdon's thinking about the future of this team. I just want to give some fun, interesting ideas at this time in the offseason, because the Pistons might be aggressive at the trade deadline, and we might see them go out and make a big splash. Pascal Siakam could be a very, very good answer. He shot 52% from the field last year, 38% from three, 75% from free throw line, and those have been his numbers the past 2 years. He wasn't a great three-point shooter in his first year in Indiana, but he's gotten much better. A guy like Tyrese Halliburton, I'm sure, has a lot to do with that. You pair him alongside Cade Cunningham, I think those numbers would translate. And I really do just like the fit overall next to Cade. Again, he is 31 years old, and it's a little bit scary because Tobias Harrison is 33, so there's not a huge gap there. But Pascal Siakam is a better player than Tobias Harris, provides more of a scoring threat, gives you similar, if not more consistent defense. So I think that there is a trade package that could get this done. And maybe it surrounds around Tobias' expiring contract. And then you add one of those tradable contracts like Duncan or Karis LeVert. Maybe 2 unprotected first-round picks could get it done potentially going forward. And, I don't like getting rid of first-rounders. And I think I'd be pretty indifferent about this trade if it were to go down. And I'd have to kind of see a proof of concept to see if it works with Pascal Siakam. But eventually it would probably be worth it. Again, speculation, not really sure what the front office's plan is going forward, but I do like the idea of a stretch four, and I think Pascal Siakam could kind of fit that role pretty well on this team. And then the other reason I think maybe this would work is the Pacers are notoriously cheap. They historically refuse to operate over the luxury tax. That was the case once again last year. They let Miles Turner walk because they didn't want to extend him, or they didn't want to re-sign him to a big long-term deal because they don't operate in the luxury tax. They refuse to. And when you're looking at their contracts, they have Tyrese Halliburton, Andrew Nembhard, Obi Toppin, and TJ McConnell all under contracts for at least the next 3 years. And then plus you have to extend Benedict Mathurin next offseason. He's the same draft class as Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren. So he's due for an extension, which I'm sure will be pretty hefty with the way he played in the playoffs. Plus you have Jarris Walker, who has team control for 2 more years, but will look for an extension next summer. He'll be eligible. So the Pacers could be looking to unload Siakam's guaranteed $146 million. He's making the most money on the team outside of Tyrese Halliburton. He's guaranteed 45 this year, 48 the next year, 52 the next year. So he's got 3 years left on his deal. And the Pacers are very top heavy with Tyrese making $200 million guaranteed over 4 years. Pascal Siakam, making $146 million over 3 years. So they could look to unload that and try and still re-sign or extend Benedict Mathurin and Jarris Walker in the future, and still be able to operate under the luxury tax like they historically have done. So I just think it would work financially. It works with what the Pacers like to do financially. It works with the Pistons timeline. It doesn't really work with the Pacers timeline. That's the one area that could be a little bit of a problem for this trade to go through. But again, who knows if this is even something the Pistons would be interested in. I just think it would be at least something to pick up the phone about or make a call about, because, again, Pascal Siakam would be a great fit alongside this Pistons young core, in my opinion, and would be a very fun addition to this team. But again, let me know in the comments if you think Pascal Siakam would be a good fit in this Pistons young core, or if you'd like to see the Pistons continue to prioritize youth and ride with the current group for the foreseeable future. And then last thing before we wrap things up, on Friday, George Blaha was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. And I just love George Blaha. He was the first play-by-play commentator I distinctly remember listening to when I was a kid. The Pistons were really the first team I ever started really paying attention to. And, it hits home with me because I have done some play-by-play, and, I'm looking to continue doing more in my career. And George has a lot to do with that. So I just wanted to give him his flowers real quick before we wrap up the show. I mean, it's just so cool to see when you listen to him talk and you kind of look up old interviews. There's sit-downs from the 90s with him and Zeke and Joe Dumars and Bill Laimbeer. So it's really cool to see that George was able to connect with multiple generations of Pistons players throughout the years. He even has stories of Bob Lanier and Chris Ford giving him a beer when he was first starting out. So if you haven't listened to his Hall of Fame inductee speech, go check that out. It's pretty cool. He gives a lot of shout-outs to everyone in the organization and his family, and it's just well-deserved because he's been around forever. He's been doing this for over 50 years. He's had conversations with Bob Lanier, and now he's having conversations and calling games for Cade Cunningham. So very, very, very cool just to see how spread out his career has been, and just how much different eras and different ownerships and different coaches and staffs that he's been able to go throughout his years, through the thick and thin. He's seen the worst, he's seen the best. And it's just pretty cool to see that he has just been such a big part of this organization, and the NBA is acknowledging all that he's done for the game. But I think I speak for most of the Pistons fan base when I say, thank you, George, just for everything you've done for the Pistons. Well-deserved induction into the Basketball Hall of Fame. And I do hope we get a few more seasons of Count That Baby in a Foul. But again, shout out George Blaha. Let me know in the comments down below just some of your favorite George Blaha moments. He's gotten a little bit sassier, a little bit snippier these last couple years, which I really, really like. He kind of gets a little frustrated with the refs or the opposing team or the opposing coaches. So I just love the flair that he brings to the Pistons broadcast. Him and Greg Kelser do a great job. So shout out George, shout out Greg. But that's all I've got for you guys today on a Tuesday edition of Pistons Daily. As always, like, subscribe, comment, turn on post notifications, and follow me on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2. Also, head over to Spotify, leave a 5-star review and a follow if you can. That'd be greatly appreciated. But once again, thank you all so much for tuning in every single day. With that being said, that is going to do it here for episode 59 of Pistons Daily, and I will catch you all next time.